the recording thing. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to our special guest, Gregg. I met him through a program called Theater for All through Queen's Theater in New York, and it's one of my favorite programs of all year. He's been a great mentor, friend, and he's answered way too many emails from me probably over the years. And he actually co-wrote one of the first plays that helped me get back into acting. Yeah, I couldn't remember it, which is actually kind of bittersweet in this moment because that company has now kind of decided to end, and it's a weird feeling. But so he was in Shakespeare in the Parks, Richard III, which was amazing, and he was also in The Cost of Living, which was up for some Tony Awards. And I definitely saw on my Twitter afterwards that the disabled community was like, oh my gosh, bring it back so I can see it. And so it's very exciting. And he's just a great resource and a person to know in the industry. So I'm going to kick it off with some starter questions, and then you guys can ask him questions. All right. So first question, Gregg, how did you start in acting and doing what you do?
Sure. Hi. Let's see, how did I start? I started in around 7th grade. Like that's when I first really started seriously. And I grew up, I grew up in the DC area initially. My father was in the military. And I came from my mother was an athlete. So I came from a very athletic family. I'm the third of 4 kids, and I'm the only and I was born with cerebral palsy, so I was the only one born with a disability in my family, but I was still expected to participate in everything. My mother specifically demanded participation in everything, which in retrospect I'm incredibly thankful and grateful for. But around early adolescence, I couldn't keep up physically with kids anymore because of my cerebral palsy, and sports became less of a viable option for me, at least in the traditional sense. And we tried all kinds of adaptations. I was a big soccer player, or I came from a big soccer family in Northern Virginia. It's big soccer country. And so I went from
as a kid, I always thought that I could play soccer because I have cerebral palsy too, and I use canes. And I thought, well, you don't need your hands for soccer. I could be a soccer player. So I definitely relate to that.
Did you play ever?
I never tried. I did track and field. I came from
soccer doesn't work. Just run.
Yeah. I came from a sports town. That's when by middle school you're how do I, all the popular kids play sports. How do I get into that? They only did theater one part of the year in the middle school. So I was like, what am I going to do until the theater opens up? And so I was like, I'll do track and field. And I was good friends with the head coach. He was my history teacher, and I liked him a lot. And so I went and asked him if I could join track and field. And he goes, well, what are you going to do? And I go, run. And he goes, how about shot put? So they did a whole modified shot put for me.
Amazing.
That was my year of sports playing.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it that year. And then, by high school, there was much more theater and music for me to fully do. But that was my 1 year of doing sports in the sports town.
Totally. That's awesome. So yeah, my mother was a track and field. That's what she did, so she did shot put and javelin and all that stuff. But we didn't do that. Again, soccer, wrestling, swimming, all that stuff. And so I was a goalkeeper. When I couldn't keep pace in the field anymore, running, but I couldn't punt the ball necessarily. So I would throw it. I just figured out how to throw it to half field, and all that stuff. So anyway, and then that was just that kind of phased out. And I took a speech and drama class, right? So Christine Ryan's speech and drama class, 7th grade. And we did all kinds of things. It was you would start with how do you do a speech where you have to show somebody how to do something, like an instructional speech or this or that. And then it got to one of the last assignments was to pick a dramatic speech. and I picked it was my older brother's suggestion actually. I don't know. He was like, do Friends, Romans, Countrymen from Julius Caesar. And so I was like, all right. So I did that, and that was just up front in front of the class. I don't even remember if it was memorized, but I distinctly remember. So at that time, I don't know how to, but so when I would, this doesn't happen so much anymore, but when I got nervous, my leg would shake kind of uncontrollably, just from spasticity, right? And so it would all like I was just, I was used to people looking used to. I mean, and people would look at me all the time, but especially if I was up in front of people, it just became this thing. I couldn't. It was hard to control and regulate and stuff. So, but when I performed that speech, something flipped for me, and I realized that like, oh, people were looking at me in a different way, and I had control over my audience in a new way, and I was like inhabiting this character. Something happened, that like that weird magical thing with performance happened, and it just felt really good, and I was so that's where I got the bug. And then I started to pursue it more fully after that. My family moved to North Carolina when I was just before my freshman year of high school, and within the first week of being there, before school had started, my mother like signed me up for these two women who were running like a 2-week long like acting training camp, and they became like lifelong friends and mentors. And I went to North Carolina School of the Arts for my senior year of high school, and then went to school in Boston, where I to pursue to get a BFA in theater. So I went to Boston University because my family's from Massachusetts originally. My mother's from right outside Boston, so I had family there. It was growing up in like outside cities or in small, coming from a small southern town. Like it was nice to like move to a city and as kind of like a starter city for potentially like New York, after school or something like that. So that's in a nutshell, that's kind of the trajectory.
What would be your dream job?
Oh man.
Or role?
Yeah, a dream role. This is silly, but how in movies sometimes when like in action movies where it even happens in like Angela Bassett does in Waiting to Exhale. I want to like walk away from a fireball or an explosion or something like in slow motion and look all cool and badass. Like that's my like that's like I want that to happen eventually. But I don't know.
All
I
right,
just want to.
If I ever have any connections to an action film, I'll give you a call.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, thanks. But no, I like the longer I'm so I've been doing this for a long time, 20, over 20 years now, like professionally, since like if you include school and training and all that stuff. And I just want to, I think like longevity in this business is just you're going to do jobs of all different sorts and varieties, So I think the goal is always to work, and I think as a disabled, yeah, it's like I have to work hard to be able to work hard at my craft, So I've had to like I've started a theater company. Like I've had to like be very self-generative in terms of material and work to create opportunity for myself and others. So I realized that a while back, right? I think when I first graduated school, it became very clear that this was going to be a hard road, and there were going to be a lot of obstacles, and the industry either didn't want me or didn't know how to deal with me, or some combination of both. And there was really no place for people like me or us in any real capacity or way. So I was going to have to find opportunity wherever I could, diversify, and make work. So, and even as a professional actor now, like I can count on one hand the amount of times I've been cast in non-disabled roles, like where it hasn't been incredibly specific, you know. And usually when I've been cast in non-disabled roles, it's because the theater or the whoever's the producer, whatever they've been operating, it's an experimentation in radical accessibility, right? So I'm with other disabled people, you know, integrated within a larger ensemble. But it's because the theater has decided, oh, we're gonna try this, you know, with this production, or they're moving, you know. So and unfortunately those have been, for the most part, those have been one-off events, and I haven't seen like those organizations really make a sustained, rigorous commitment to furthering that, you know, or furthering integrated deaf and disabled into their seasons or their companies or whatever it may be.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah, but all the more, again, that's like why I think yes, all the more reason to kind of just again to again the need to kind of make things again, the need so we were talking before, you know, and again the common bond is the TFA, right, training program, which didn't exist, right, when I got out of school, right, and again was created. And even the role that you all met me in as director of inclusion, I never, when I was working officially at Queen's Theater, I never envisioned myself doing that, you know. That role was specifically created, you know, for me, right, in conversation with Taryn, the executive director. But it's great that like that became, you know, that program again enabled the space for us all to gather, right, for community to kind of like form, and for us all to meet. And again, that this conversation wouldn't be happening without that. So it's really, I think that's awesome, right, in the truest sense of the word, and really wonderful. And I've found that, you know, we're here talking about kind of advocacy, right, and how you can, like the best way I've found that progress can be made and opportunity can be generated is through the creation of programs, right, that are specific and universal, right, for anybody. So because what needs to happen is people need the space to be able to practice their craft, right, and come together. I think theater, more so than film and television, is a space where community comes to get, like people come to be in community with each other and have a shared experience, whether that's seeing a play, getting a play up on its feet to present to an audience, or, you know, whatever it may be. But I think theater is really awesome and it's really singular in that, in its power to do that. So plays and content and artistry is what drives, in my mind, kind of access, advocacy, and opportunity.
I agree. All right. Third question. What are the top 5 things you keep in a rehearsal or performance bag?
Top 5 things. Well, I would need a bag first.
So you don't take stuff with you when you go like on an audition or like onto set? You don't take anything with you?
No. No. Sorry, do you?
I do. I mean, yeah.
So tell me, maybe.
I'll just tell you what I do. No.
Yeah.
I do. I put a lot of thought into like the bags I take into like an audition. Like, when I auditioned for the play, which, if you remind me of the name, down in
Emily
San Diego,
Driver's Great Race Through Time and Space. Right.
I like had this bag, and like, so I also plan, like, I set the bag next to me so I can put scripts and paper, like, so I have the scripts with me. I usually have my headshot in there.
Mhm.
I was explaining in another one of these that we did, I auditioned for the cripple of a Nishman.
Yeah.
And so I had to do the Irish accent, and so I like want to have my headphones in, and I'm usually listening to the dialogue so it's fresh. I usually have water with me and like just general things. So that's why I have a
Yeah,
rehearsal
no,
audition bag. Yeah.
that's cool. Totally.
And yeah, and then I'm doing classes with the groundlings currently. And so in that bag, I have water and like a notebook with a pen, which I usually always have too. And I'll have like pens and paper and that kind of thing. Hand sanitizer these days, that's a big one.
Sure,
A
sure.
mask in case I feel like I need to put one on.
Absolutely. So yeah, so all those things. It may just be I don't know. I mean, I just have like my book bag or my shoulder bag or whatever, and if I'm it's yeah, script, water, mask. The one thing that I always have is toothbrush and toothpaste, like a little travel toothbrush and toothpaste if I need to brush my teeth after lunch before rehearsal, whatever, just as like I want to make sure I have clean breath, if I'm in somebody's face talking to them or, being in a scene with them. So that's yeah, that would be it. But yeah, I guess I travel light. In general, yeah, I don't know. That might just be the military kid in me too. Like I just feel like you always have to be like I moved around so much. So even when I go on trips, or like if I'm going to stay somewhere, I always just very rare. It's always a carry-on, like very rarely do I try to get everything in a carry-on, or like I'm very minimalist, right? In terms of what I carry with me. Also, I don't know. I used to have like book bag like full of books and things I would take on, and then it's tiring. Like hold on, I'm disabled. Why am I carrying a 30-pound bag? You know what I mean? Like maybe I can get rid of this and this and this and this. So I try to keep light and mobile.
I don't know if you can hear the yard guys next door, but I live in California where there's always a yard being mowed.
I can't hear it.
Okay,
Don't worry, I'm in New
okay.
York, so you might hear a siren or
I was
jackhammering.
like, I don't even. When was the last time you guys mowed that lawn over there? Why is it today? Because I know the schedule for here usually. Yeah, like anyways. What advice do you have for someone that wants to do what you do?
That wants to do what?
That wants to be an actor or like go out in the world and do all the things that you do. What
Oh,
advice?
sure.
Yeah.
I well, so two things I would say. So Jim Lebrecht, who was was a sound guy, right, at Berkeley Rep in California, and is the co-director of Crip Camp, right, and is actually in the film and civil disability rights pioneer, right, fantastic guy. I met him and talked to him, and and I went to a premiere of the film. It was pre-pandemic. I was invited to through a friend to the premiere. Really incredible experience. But during the talkback, I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, if you want to be in spaces that you're not, you have to figure out. You start to ask yourself, why am I not in this space? And then you have to figure out, how do I get there? And so, if I would say, don't, if there's somewhere that you want to be, or if there's some program that you want to be in, don't hold yourself back, right? And don't let other people's, I guess, lack of experience or fear, with disability, or their fear and anxiety about like possibly training you or teaching you, stop you from pursuing what you want to do in terms of training or being involved in a theater or involved with a production or find a way to get in the door. Obviously there are very real kind of structural and systemic, obstacles to our kind of participation in all kind of aspects of society, but particularly theater and the cultural sector. And you got to figure out a way to get in. And the best thing to do is ask. I'd never be afraid to ask. I had I have a day job, and my former CEO was like, the most powerful word in the English language is ask. The worst anybody can do is say no. So always ask for what you want and what you need, and figure out how to do that. And that's a habit, right? That's a practice. It doesn't just happen, right? So, and I think figuring out how to articulate, like, really what it is that you're asking for, and to articulate that concisely and succinctly is really, again, that's a skill that needs to be honed and developed and practiced. The only way you're going to do it is to practice that, right? And so I know, and we've talked about this in the TFA, we were actually discussing this before we came on, right? Like, asking for what you need can be really difficult because there's fear of retribution, there's fear of, being a burden or asking too much. And I think like all those fears and those will come up naturally. But I think there's always ask. Again, you won't know until you do.
I think sometimes too, you learn as you go. Like, you may not realize, like, with me doing improv, like, I've thought like, oh, do I use my cane as like a prop, like, or do I just, like, is it part of me? And then one day I was doing a scene, and the guy doing the scene like grabbed my cane and started using it as a prop, and the teacher was like, are you okay with that? And I was like, well, I didn't really think about it, but then the more I thought about it, it was like, yeah, that's not okay. Like, and so I'm learning from that experience, like, what I need as well. Like, it's not always going to be something right away.
Totally. Right.
Yeah.
And so again, it's okay to know that, like, you won't know until you actually have the experience, right? And so it's all right to say, oh, I didn't realize that, I've never been in this situation before. How do I even know what to ask for? I've never, it's so yes, and it's okay to have these kind of to have the conversation and be like, I didn't realize this until just now. It's interesting that you say that, though, about using, your forum crutches or whatever. As actors, for the longest time, I didn't want to use my disability. I kind of wanted to disassociate with it. I wanted to appear non-disabled or normal, whatever that means. And what a phenomenal waste of time. Yeah, in retrospect, I'm still working on this. Again, as actors, what we do, our disabilities are, whether they're visible or not, who we are as people, acting training, and maybe this is the second part to answer your question, right? Is like plumbing the full depths of human emotion, right? And that means bringing your full essence and humanity to any role that you play. And if you're disabled, that is an essential part of your humanity, right? It's not everything about you, but if I don't know, like, as someone with cerebral palsy, every character I ever play is going to have cerebral palsy. There's no way they're going to move and walk and have the neurology that I have because I'm embodying that character. So what's the word? I was fooling myself to think that I could fool an audience, right? To say like, oh, I'm not disabled, see me as something else. And I think that's a natural response. But again, it was by not pulling on everything that I possibly have, right? Which makes me unique, right? Which is my a unique aspect of my humanity, right? Or your forum crutches, right? How can they be utilized? Again, the character, you have them, so the character has them, right? There's no kind of separation between the two, right? So this, I would say, the sooner you, and again, that's another kind of habit and something that needs to be practiced and developed, and in some ways, small, medium, and large, right, throughout. And again, but realizing that you have the choice, right? You always have the choice to bring anything you want forward in a character, right? And that's what the rehearsal process and the research, is for, to say, well, what if, you want to give yourself choices and options in terms of like what's available to you as a character, what you're going to bring into the scene, how you're going to respond to your scene partner, right? So why limit yourself, right? People are going to put plenty of, whether you're disabled or not, people are going to put plenty of limitations, on you throughout life and in this business. So you don't need to further compound that, but that took me a long, long time, to even just kind of like crack that open. And I'll be working on that for forever.
Before each class, they have us like walk around and you're supposed to move a certain way or like act like you're in something sticky. And I thought, well, I'm not doing this the same way as everyone else. But then I was like, but there are people that would do it the way I'm doing it.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, no, the pressure to
don't be so much in your head about it.
Yeah, no, obviously the pressure to, I mean, again, like the pressure to kind of copy or work, we're not, again, I do have very real, I don't move like other people. I don't have the same level of flexibility, agility, balance, like, so instead of, I spent a lot of, that's time I could have spent figuring out how I move, how I navigate through space, how I inhabit character through my particular uniqueness and with my particular idiosyncrasies as an actor, rather than beating myself up and expending a lot of energy trying to appear like everybody else, which is impossible, right? Again, so I think the goal is to figure out how do I more fully inhabit this vessel, right? And find the full range of expression in the body that I have, right? Rather than trying to, because then for me, that led to a lot of pushing, right? And overextension, which which I do every day anyway, just to walk to the store or whatever, like, and so, but is antithetical to good acting, right? Or authentic acting, right? Or authentic, so it's right now and I think what acting training does is, and for me as someone with cerebral palsy, it means moving slower, smaller, and giving myself again, that's difficult, right? It's difficult for me to for me to, the way my neurology and nervous system works, right? What I've come to understand is I'm always kind of pushing through tension and feeling like I have to move, like do more than what is necessary, right? So again, like moving through molasses, right, is actually a great exercise to see like, well, what happens if I slow myself down? Like, what's going to happen? Like, what is, again, you have to kind of be open to investigation and curiosity, right? For in your own body and in your own self, right? And that can be really difficult because I didn't develop a kind of fluency and vocabulary to talk about my body and what was going on with it until I was much, much older, like in my early 30s, and so, but and teachers did, again, and I think like acting teachers, through no fault of their own, right, don't know how to, they don't know how to talk, either. So I think developing that vocabulary is really difficult, but it's absolutely like, again, it's just more about like, well, how would I do this? Again, acting is about like not necessarily I'm going to transform, you know, sometimes it is, I'm going to be like incredibly transformative, right? Or transcend something. It's more about like, well, what would I, Gregg, be in this particular scenario? How would I, how would I navigate and operate and speak and work through this, right? Me as a person, right? That's how the character is gonna come through me, but it's gonna come through this body, right? And this body has cerebral palsy, so why fight that? Why be at odds with that? And how can I just need to be more open to the idea that how I move across stage, how I deliver that line, how, you know, is absolutely is okay, right? I mean, you know, I've heard the phrase, you know, countless times, like you're enough, right? Actors again, all actors are like, I'm, you know, have to grapple with that, right? And I think when when you live with a disability, you know, you know that you can't, you're different, right? Like that becomes apparent very early on, right? And psychologically, emotionally, you're always dealing with that. I'm always dealing with that, right? So, but I think acting training in theater and that exploration is just like, again, just know I'm enough. How I am, who I am, with my disability is everything I need to be. I can't do anything to change it, so I might as well embrace it or figure out a way to work with it, and make it work for me. You know, easier said than done, but that's the practice, right? And I think that's the work. You know, so don't, again, because if you're fighting against yourself, right, and who you are, the character is not going to come through. You're not going to be available to the work in a way that you should be.
What is the favorite role that you've ever played? What's your favorite role?
I recently did I played Caliban in The Tempest. I did like a audio production of The Tempest with some really phenomenal actors, and I love that character. And so he's you know, he's a monster. But he's, again, I was like, that's something I can you know, um I just it's somebody who's physically different than everyone else in the play, you know, who it moves differently, thinks differently, speaks differently, you know, and it's just something like that was something where I feel like that was an opportunity for me as an actor to be like, okay, where this is where I can like really let it rip, like how, and again, it wasn't performative necessarily, it was all audio, but it was like, but even I still using all my resources for it. It was like, here's a place where I can let my again, where I don't have to be afraid to kind of like bring my disability to the forefront, whatever that means, you know. But I don't have to be afraid to like, I don't have to hold back, you know, in terms of my take on the character, because his difference informs who he is and how he operates and lives in that world. And it's funny, the more I practice that in an artistic setting, the calmer and better I feel, you know, in my personal life. But also like, I love new plays, and you know, being an actor is not, you don't always get to, you do a lot of readings, you do a lot of like new play development, you do a lot of new, you know, you just do a lot of readings, right? Not every play ever gets produced, and that can be very difficult. And I love new plays, and I love connecting with playwrights. And so I've like, that is a really awesome way to kind of make connections, have an opportunity to have a more expansive like opportunity as an actor, even if it's just reading stage directions. I love being in a room and making things with people, right? So it's like how because you learn by being with other actors, you know, and you learn by being in the room, and you learn by being engaged in the process, whether that be in a small way or a large way, you know. And I've always been interested in, I've been leads of shows, and I've done that, but I'm always interested. I've always been like, let me be the guy with like 2 scenes and 20 lines. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm more interested in like the I don't know, because I still get to be involved, right? Like, I still get to be around all those people, that great talent, everyone, regardless of whether you are the lead or, like, again, the guy who comes out for one scene, we're all getting paid the same, so like it does, I'm just like, again, and it seems like for me that's manageable enough to like really kind of dig in and figure out sometimes I can get overwhelmed by the size and scope of a part, and so for me it's an opportunity to like be able to focus and zero in on just like a particular bit of text and really like work that. Yeah, but I like monsters, villains, and people who are like off center, right? Or undesirable. I don't get an opportunity to play them, you know. But I think that's something for me, it's an opportunity, again, similar to Caliban, it's an opportunity where I feel I can just I can let it all hang out, and I don't need to pretend to be, I don't need to be the nice guy or the person who like has it all together, you know. So those are roles that I gravitate to, and want more opportunity kind of to play.
And this is my last question, and then Michaela and Rachel can ask questions. What is one thing you wouldn't change about yourself?
Let's see. I like my hair. I'm just glad I still have this much hair. Let's see. No, I think I'm not. I grew up, again, I mentioned that I grew up in a military family, and I grew up in a Catholic family, right? And I'm not practicing. I haven't been for quite some time. But what it did was it instilled in me like this idea of service, and I don't know why I chose this field, right? Like knowing how difficult it is, knowing, that it would be not the easiest path, right? I could be in real estate or I could do anything else, right?
I mean, that bug that bites you, it's a strong one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's great, like I've met, again, like we all, look again, like the people I've met, the things I've done, like my life is richer and fuller for it, but I think I'm really good. I have good ideas, and I'm a good connector, like, of people, right? So if I have an idea, I could follow, and it gets like I'm very dogged about like pursuing the idea and finding the right people to help manifest that idea, right? And so because I feel, again, like there were no, as I said, there were no programs like TFA when I got out of school. There were no programs like TFA when, and like it's, and I didn't have, there's there's a lot of work involved with the development, creation, and management of programs like that, and making something out of scratch, but if I can, again, what it does is connect me to my community in the larger field, right? The larger theater community. And that's where I want to be. What it does, like those programs and that work gives me access to and allows me an opportunity to work with people that I want to work with, whether they be friends or just people I admire or whomever. And I also want to do that. I also want to make it easier, for other people in whatever small way I can, right? Because it takes not enough people are doing it, right? And there hasn't been people often can't imagine something until they see it, right? And so that's why, again, if people see people like us on stage, right, they can go, oh, I can do that, oh, there's a place for me here. If somebody sees a play where there's a role for a guy with cerebral palsy and a young woman in a wheelchair, or, whomever it may be, like then they say, oh, oh my gosh, like I can see myself in this. I can see myself up there. I can see myself on screen, and that's how we kind of, you need to imagine yourself there. And then you need to figure out, and then you can, and if you know that other people have like gotten there before you, then they can say, okay, that's possible. That's why like people like Ali Strugger winning the Tony is such a big deal, right? Because, and I remember just on social media and online after that, it was filled with like young people all over the world being like, oh my gosh, like that's me, I can be there now, and that's awesome, right? Because the more people, when I because I entered the field at a time when there was like, I had never seen anyone like me on stage, and so I just think and the more people that show up, right, and demand to be there, like that's how change will happen. Unfortunately, like, Ali Stroker's Tony win and recent nominations of friends of mine and success of this show or that show or whatever, like hasn't made access any easier, I would say, from like, no one's talking about building ramps at Broadway or off-Broadway
Right.
houses, or no one's like saying like, how do we get more than 7 seats, like accessible seats in Broadway theaters for like wheelchair users, or, remember, but it's a start, right? And again, like until they're, and yeah, again, people don't go into spaces because they're inhospitable, right? And they don't go into the field because they don't see themselves reflected. So the more we can get in, and the more people are, it's like opening a new frontier, right? In a way. So you gotta get in the covered wagon and like build the road and like build the map and maybe get dysentery and snake bit and like all that stuff along the way. Do you know what I mean? But eventually you'll reach, the promised land. You'll get there in some way, shape, or form. And what that does is make the path a little easier and wider for other people to follow. And I think that's one thing that I wouldn't.
Something
that's something I feel positive and confident about in myself,
Something I noticed at the Tonys, and I don't know, but like your play was up against like a Doll's House, and then there was another one, but they both had like disabled characters, and I was like, are those actors disabled?
Like, yeah. Yeah, it was a good season. So cost of living, there were 2 characters with disabilities. Doll's House had a phenomenal actor named Michael Patrick Thornton. And Doll's House was directed by Sam Gold and translated by Amy Herzog. And they are married, they're a couple, and they have a disabled daughter. Right. And I'm not sure how, but again, like so they became aware, right, and conscious of disability in a very real way, like in their immediate family. And so Sam has become a great advocate, right, and has cast and been inclusive of deaf and disabled people as a result of that, which is really great. There's a movie called, there's a Broadway show called Grey House, which has a deaf actor in it now. So again, like there have been, it's like happening slowly but surely, but again, it's like who's making those decisions? Again, like I had a job, right? Because the play existed, and I knew the playwright, that particular director, again, has, is a member of the disabled community now because his daughter, right? Because, and is conscious and aware of that and wants to make change through that. He also directed, Spring Awakening years back with Madison Ferris. Which was on Broadway, so it kind of takes that. Right now it's kind of taking that, and the woman who wrote my play, Martina, right, worked as a attendant, right, as a personal care attendant to two guys with cerebral palsy, and like that, and she wrote a 10-minute play about that experience, which became the larger full-length version of Cost of Living, right? So it came from like proximity and like lived experience to disabled people, rather than somebody just kind of, but that's how it's happening, right? Slowly but surely. And I think, but if you've got, people love success, right? So if we can say, oh, this was successful and this is possible, then maybe we can do it again and again and again and again, right? So yeah, it's all good. And yeah, again, we're like in 2018, right, when Ally was nominated, she was, I don't know, she may have been the only one that year, right? And here there was like 5 or so, more, so that's progress. It may not be the progress we want, right? But it's a step in the right direction, and once we get to those places and we enter those communities, we hopefully can, we can always push for more. Yeah. So. What you got, Michaela and Rachel? Bring it.
Yes, I have a question. I have a couple questions, but my first one is, so you said you can count on one hand or something like that, paraphrasing, how many times you've played a character who's not disabled. And I'm curious about like how, like, and this is sort of I'm curious about, I don't know if you know or if like this came up in conversation, but I'm curious about like in the rehearsal room working with a director and like you playing a character who is disabled and you're disabled, and has the director ever been disabled? And then if not, like, does it sort of, do y'all have like a conversation about like, or I guess because my last semester in college, I like had sort of a lead role in a play, and so like we had to do a lot of like different choreography things. Like there was sort of this like dance number. It wasn't a musical, but we still had to do this like dance number, and so there sort of had to be like a conversation about like how do we make this accessible, and like so I don't know. I feel like when I've been in stuff, like my disability comes up a lot just because it's like we have to block and choreograph and stuff. And oftentimes the director kind of like gives me like the choice of being like, what do you feel comfortable doing? And so I'm just curious, like, what have your interactions, or what has the rehearsal room been like as like someone with a disability and maybe the director is not disabled, especially like playing a disabled character? Like, do they kind of give you agency or free reign, or like do they ask you, I don't know, because sometimes maybe they have a vision, or like, but maybe then you contribute. I don't know. What's the rehearsal room been like in those situations?
Yeah, well, I think any positive, like ideally you want to be in conversation, right? And you want to be in collaboration with the director. right? So if you are cast in something and you what was the play, I mean, that you were cast in?
It was Everybody by Brandon Jacob Jenkins. I think
Oh,
that's what
okay.
his name is. And
Gotcha.
so I had to play, yeah, I had to play like 5 different characters. It was a
Mhm.
lot, but it was good. It was good. It was just like the one awkward part was like the dance number, just because it was like I could tell like they didn't really know like what we should do in that situation. And I also like was like, well, I guess we have to figure it out. Like, I don't know. Because we also didn't really have a choreographer. We were just kind of like, because it was a really short part in the play. Anyway,
Sure.
but it was
Yeah,
like,
yeah. But
it
did
was
it,
interesting.
so did it work, but did it all work out? I mean, did you,
Yeah, it ended up working out. It was one of those things where, like, at first I was like, because I also had to figure out like which mobility aid is going to work best for this. Because at first I was going to use my walker, but then they like wanted us to go around the entire theater, and I was like, that's kind of too much. So I'm gonna like use my scooter, but then that made it harder to do like choreography. So it's just kind of this like you have to like figure out. It's a process.
yeah, totally. So, yeah, so, as you learn and realize, like, most people don't know what to do, right? Or won't know what to do because they've been confronted with like our bodies or, uh, so, but what is theater is a constant exercise in figuring it out, right? It's like, it's a constant exercise in creative solutions to problems, right? So, I would say wherever possible, if you're looking at the script and and you're doing your homework and you say, okay, here, if you can identify those issues where you think, not where they're problems, right? But where you may need something. Again, comes back to like very basically like articulating need and having the conversation, right? You have every right to kind of reach out to the director, the stage manager, whomever in advance and say, or both, CC or, have a joint conversation, be like, I want to talk to you about the character. I want to talk to you about this moment. You are supposed to be in conversation and collaboration with the director about the character and the best way to tell the story. So you've got the job, you've been cast. So like you are part of the production, right? So, and you may say, I don't know what the solution is, but I feel like as an actor, your job is to at least kind of help identify, that this is going to be an issue, right? And hopefully come with ideas. Like, they may not all work. They may be terrible, right? But like the artistic process is trying, until the right idea presents itself, right? And is the correct fit. And so I think I don't, there's an opportunity there to just kind of bring people in and say, we will figure this out together, right? And so you don't have to feel like the weight of that or the burden of that is all on you, right? To kind of say, I have to figure this out alone. The earlier you can start that conversation, the earlier you can kind of make people aware that this is it and make them aware that this isn't a negative, right? It may be something that you're not used to. I don't know if you've ever been asked to like dance or do choreography in a production before, right? That might have been new to you too. So it's perfectly okay to acknowledge of like, I've never done this before. I don't quite know I'm not quite sure what I need in this moment, but I want to I'm talking to you now because I know like this is going to be, and here's what I can do. You mentioned mobility. So I can use my scooter, I can use crutches. These are things that are available to me. And this is how I see it. And this is my range of dance and flexibility or movement and da, da, da. So the director starts to have an idea too, and again is working with you specifically as an actor and you in relation to others in the ensemble, right? So how are they going to make that scene work? How are they going to tell the story right in that moment? So the weight and the pressure and the idea of like my disability is going to be a problem here, right, becomes smaller. And it just becomes, I'm an actor in this role. How do I, how do I tell the story? And you're not alone up there, right? It's like, director, I need help with this, stage manager, I need help with this. my fellow actors, we're going to work together to figure this out. So ideally, hopefully, there's an opportunity for everybody to grow and learn, and what did we there was that Diana, right? Do you guys remember Diana from TFA, the instructor? So she said one of the best things I've ever heard, ever, right? People are always talking about getting out of their comfort zone, right? I got to get out of my comfort zone. You got to get out of your comfort zone. And she said, no, stop that. It's not about getting out of your comfort zone. It's about expanding your comfort zone. Do the thing you've never done so you can expand your comfort zone. So the thing that you were used to be uncomfortable with, you are now more comfortable with, right? And so there's an opportunity for everybody. You're not leaving, everything you've ever known to kind of like fix this one issue, right? Or deal with this one scene. It's an opportunity to learn, expand capacity, and maybe find new modes of working, right? Individually and collectively, that can aid in the story, the staging, and the artistry of the work. So that's, I would say, like, start those conversations early. And that's something, again, like there can be anxiety around starting that conversation, but it's a lot better to get over that fear early on than suddenly get to that time in rehearsal, maybe when you only have a week left before production and be like, oh no, So, and again, it's if it's helpful to think of it as you're trying to make it the best experience possible for you and everyone involved, right? And also be respectful of the process, respectful of your ensemble, and say, this is what I need. So I think like the articulating need is a way to practice self-respect and respect for your peers, right? And the process. So just, again, ask early, ask often, and keep and let people know that they can ask, that they can have the conversation. Because often people are so afraid, right? They may not even ask. They may not even feel like they can, or they may be so afraid of making a mistake. So I think by you, Michaela, in that instance, or whomever, right, in whatever instance they may be, saying what you're doing is you're giving yourself permission and everybody in the room permission to have a conversation that they haven't had before, and to figure it out together. And that means you're failing and succeeding and growing all together, rather than just all that weight being on you or the individual. Hope that helps.
Yeah, and I guess with that, like, my question is, like, because I haven't really been a part of, like, outside of college, I haven't been a part of, like, a professional, like, super professional production. And so I guess my question is, like, because you've been a part of, like, a lot of, like, bigger productions. And so I guess my question is, because I know we've talked about, like, how, getting the role is, like, kind of maybe the hardest part. And, like, but so I'm just curious, like, once you're in the room, like, has that been your experience? Like, you've had good experiences of, like, once you're in the production? Like, I know getting cast and things is, like, can be a challenge, but, like, so you had, like, in your experience, like, being in these larger productions, have you, in rehearsal, you've had, like, largely good experiences, or, like, it's been a comedy?
Yeah, I think so. When I have when I've been brave or courageous enough to communicate, and not hold things back, right? Because if I found that if I don't express myself, or if I'm worried about what people might think, or if I'm worried that people might, be like, you're fired, which is, it's not gonna happen, it's not gonna happen unless you do something egregious, right? That's where I've gotten into trouble, where I haven't, like, communicated effectively from the get-go, and throughout, to say I'm good, or like build or feel like I can say this is what I need throughout. Because I get nervous, and I realize that, like, people don't know a lot about disability. There's a lot I don't know about my cerebral palsy, still. So I don't always know how to articulate what I need, and so I'm afraid of making the mistake as well, and I have to get over that because I have a job to do, and I want to have the best experience possible. And so it hasn't always been easy. And I think theater is rife with BS and difficulty and, but you're there if you're cast, again, they cast you, so you have the job, and then your job is to perform, is to bring that role to life as fully as possible. So whatever you need to do that, do it, without causing harm to yourself or others, ideally, right? And I would say, again, like this, yes, like big productions, one thing I realized, doing shows of big scale like Broadway or Shakespeare in the Park, they can be intimidating, right? But once you get in, you're like, oh, I'm just doing, it's the same as what I did in a black box with 99 people and a chair and a bucket. Again, everything you need to do, you need to bring the same amount of energy, the only thing different is the scale of it, and I'm in Central Park, but I could be in Omaha, Nebraska, so I think you can be kind of intimidated by the glitz and the kind of the grandeur of the scale of something. At the end of the day, you have to go back to the basics, and everything is black box on steroids or summer stock on steroids. Do you know what I mean? It's just and that was a great realization for me. I was listening to something. Oh, I was listening to an interview with Tom Holland the other day, and people were asking about getting cast in Spider-Man and all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, I was like, it's just actors. Eventually, you realize it's just a bunch of actors sitting around wearing funny suits and costumes, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, you just want to be an actor, right? I feel like if you take disability politics, identity, all that out, what are we striving to do? I just want to be seen as an actor, right? And I want to be seen as somebody who is a good collaborator and that people want to work with, ideally. So what do I need to do in order to do that to the best of my ability and to the fullest? So figure that, and maybe that will help. What do I need to be able to do my job the best way I can? So you can strip everything away. So I'm going to need to be able to get to the restroom. I'm going to need to be able to perform this choreography. I'm going to need to be able to do this, blah, 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 blah. I need to watch my energy levels, fatigue, whatever it may be, so what do I need to do? I've got the job. Cool. Now I need to have the conversation so people understand what I need to do the job to the best of my ability and respect the process and the opportunity that I have. Yeah. How do I be the best ensemble member that I can be? Right. So that's I don't know, that's helped me. Right. Regardless of what, sorry.
Mary and I talked about this, versus when I just did the everybody introductory improv class versus I auditioned and I got in. There's something in your head where when you've auditioned, you're like, I've earned it. I've done what somebody here saw something in me and they like it. So I deserve to be here. So I think once you've gotten past the audition, just reminding yourself that someone chose for you to be there, and that will really help, that you got there just the same way that everybody else did. I think can be really helpful.
Yeah. Rachel, did you have a question?
Oh yes. Hi, Greg.
Hi.
I have a couple of questions, but I wanted to give space for Michaela to ask anything. I had a couple of questions, and the one that I was wondering about first was in the industry, the film TV industry, I was curious to find out your thoughts about why things are changing. It's really great. There is more inclusion. But it still seems like a lot of the disabled characters are still supporting roles. There are some projects where the disabled character is the lead, but I was just wondering, is there some kind of hesitation in the industry, or is there what's making it so that you might have stories related around the disabled lead character, but they're they have they're non-disabled, but the supporting characters have disabilities. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. I think there are a whole host of factors for that, and unfortunately, like the primary ones may be economic. I had a producer tell me years ago, and it was we were just having a very frank, kind of refreshing conversation, and he said, Greg, when I hire somebody like you, when I hire someone with a disability, like the problems start for me. And so, and in terms of like, it makes it, because then he has to figure out like how to, I have to now, like, I have to figure out this and this and this and this, and there are costs associated with that, and blah blah blah. It's like, and that can be difficult. So right, it can be. So why, so it's, and more often than not, obviously people want to choose the easier path, right, or what they're used to, rather than kind of, take a risk, right? Unfortunately, I think like there's a lot of risk associated with casting disabled people still, right? And I think in terms of content, we don't have, for me, coming out of school, I realized when I first got out of school, I was like, I can't name a single disabled playwright. I can't name a single disabled director. I can't name a single disabled producer. I can't name like we're not creating narratives and stories about ourselves and about our experiences. And other communities, communities of color, communities built around gender, sexual identity, right? Traditionally have used theater to kind of start, as you use theater, it kind of is a vehicle for telling those stories, right? And often it starts in theater and then it works into like film and television, and becomes more mainstream, right? And I think that's why I think like the material, the content, the play is everything, right? And just we don't have why there aren't more of us is because we don't have kind of the programmatic or artistic infrastructure to like tell our stories. Like we haven't developed talent from within, right, in a robust enough way that other communities have done, and that took decades, right? Like we don't have a Shonda Rhimes, we don't have yeah, do you know what I mean, who are we still need to get into the field. And again, if we've had the first Tony winner in a wheelchair, right, in 2018, the first time Yale School of Drama accepted a person with a visible physical disability was in 2018, 2019, right? There are still huge barriers to participation, training, everything in this industry, right? And so, and as I said, like I didn't expect to be an artistic director or an arts administrator or anything, or in a leadership capacity at all, right? I wanted to be an actor, but in order to be an actor, I needed to be able I needed to do all these other things, right? Which expanded my comfort zone, expanded my capacity, right? And then I have this weird skill set, right, that very few people have, right? So yeah, we have a lot of work to do, I think, and we have to kind of, that's why I think either developing writers or making relationships with writers, right, is extremely important, because who controls actors have very little power in the industry, right? Unless you're kind of a huge megastar. Like as actors, we need somebody to make something, right, that we can be in more often than not. We need the play to exist, or the film to exist, or the podcast to exist, or whatever it might be, like in order to practice our craft. Dancers can dance every day. Musicians can practice their instrument every day. Painters and sculptors can paint and sculpt every day. Like as actors, we need so many things to happen before we are able to engage and practice our craft. And as disabled actors, we need to, we don't have the apparatus or the infrastructure, I think, to like kind of tell our stories yet, in a way that other communities have. So, and that's going to take time, and sometimes, and not everyone wants to do that. Some people just want to be actors, and that's great. Not everybody wants to like take on the responsibility of like learning how to be a producer or learning how to be an artistic director, and that's totally cool, but I think we just have a lot of work to do. And again, like, I don't know about you all, but until TFA, like there were very few instances where I even got to be around other disabled people, right? In any like a critical mass of disabled people, right? So it's still, I think one thing that people don't understand is that like it's very kind of counterintuitive for me to be with other disabled people. Like even one other disabled person, much less 6 or 7 or 16, so that's, I think there's some misunderstandings about the nature of the disabled community or the disabled communities, right? Like we don't commune, so until that was true in my experience, and again, what theater has done is allowed me a space for, again, to have access to my community and for others, and it's been that exchange. So we need to kind of create the space and for us to, and we've been, again, the disabled people have been historically excluded from spaces, right, from society, for a whole host of reasons, right? So we have a lot of work to do. I think it's going to take decades and potentially generations for that change to really occur and really see it in a way that we've seen the strides made for communities of color, right? But we're working on it. That's what I would say. I don't know. Does that make sense? Is that clear?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I think there's hope. It's just going to take time, I guess. Yeah, definitely. I was also curious about, you talked a lot about how sometimes you can get distracted with like some things. I was wondering, is there any tips or anything that you've used or that you have suggestions on how to stay grounded in scenes and such so that you're not pushing or you're not having intrusive thoughts about like I'm just trying to being concerned about your disability in the scene, or how do I play non-disabled, or there's so many different thoughts that can come into our minds and and in acting. But I feel like sometimes it's even more so as disabled actors, because I don't want to say the word prove ourselves, but I don't know what else word to use, but and so being able to stay grounded in our embodiment of the character as our focus. And I was just wondering if there's anything that has worked for you.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure this out, and my wife is a great actor, and she's a voice teacher, like she's a Linklater, designated Linklater teacher, which is a major kind of vocal breath technique, in theater. And I always get frustrated with her because I would be like, what do I need to do, right, to feel more present and grounded? And she's like, just breathe. And I'm like, no, that can't be it. Like, no. It can't be that simple. Tell me what to do. Like, just breathe, I think if you're having it's that tricky thing, right? That's whether it be in rehearsal or performance, if you're feeling it, the character's feeling it, like you have to be open and available to everything that's happening. Like Mark Rylance, the great English actor, says speaking to the ghost. I think he uses the term, it's speaking to the ghost. Whatever is going on with you in that moment is acknowledge it, and get in the habit of like kind of saying, this is happening. How can I work through this and use it? Now, if it's something that is getting in the way, right, and you feel unsafe, then you can always stop, right? Ideally not in performance, but in the rehearsal room, sure. And safety should be first and foremost, right? Whether that be physical safety, emotional safety, whatever it may be, right? These are, I've found that like, thinking about disability, thinking about identity, thinking about my place, in the world, thinking about trying to like talk about my body and my issues can be a lot, but if I frame things in kind of, I can't do my job effectively in this moment, I don't feel safe in this moment, and I don't mean kind of, I don't necessarily mean emotionally unsafe, because as actors, I feel like we're supposed to be, like, we're supposed to challenge ourselves, right? We're supposed to be empathetic. We're supposed to enter into characters and situations that are different from our own, right? That's like a job requirement to some extent, right? But if you feel physically unsafe, you can always stop, right? And say, I need to adjust here or think here. I wish I had a better, I wish I had like a clear answer and be like, this works, but I think it goes back to, you can always stop and ask for what you need. You can always, if something's not working in the scene, you can have a conversation with the director. Or if it's you can have a conversation with a playwright. You can talk about the moment, right? You can talk about where you feel stuck or blocked. And you can say, well, and it's, but I think I'm still like, it's as simple as, how do I stay grounded and present? I remember seeing an interview with Meryl Streep, arguably like one of the greatest actors to ever live, right? Who's just kind of like a natural phenomenon. She is, and she was talking about being in auditions early on in her career and being like, I just had to remind myself that my butt is on this chair. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you what kind of conversation? And that's rooted in breath. Again, it all goes back to kind of managing breath, managing thought, that like you're putting yourself in an extreme situation, right? It's weird. Your body, you're in order to do what we need to do, we have to engage our imaginations in a way that can, like, we're playing tricks on ourselves constantly, right? We're playing make-believe, right? We are bringing into life imaginary circumstance. And so that can't hurt you. Do you know what I mean? But we're all like, acting training is about learning how to, when you come up to those thresholds where everything in you says, no, stop, is like to identify, again, it's developing awareness to say, this is happening with me right now, and to welcome that in, which may be counterintuitive, right? But to say, I hear you. I like literally to have like this conversation with yourself. I hear you. Like, I've got this. We've got this. Like, say yes to that feeling. Say yes to that emotion. And it's that weird thing of like, how do I like say yes to that while delivering that big speech, right? Or while delivering that line, because that is what's like, that's bringing the reality of the moment into the room and into the text and to your scene partner, right? And into the play. And that's when the real shit, excuse my language, right, starts to happen, right? So it makes total sense to want to, like, your body's going to go, you're going to die. I'm not going to die. I'm sitting in the chair. I'm in a room. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm talking to Kelly or Michaela, or you know what I mean? Like, I'm just, what are those things that you need to do to make, to remind yourself that I'm in a play, and I'm just going to say the line with however I'm feeling right now. And I think and again, it's the most simple, complicated thing of, like, I just need to breathe and talk. And I know, like, I haven't figured it out myself, right? But when I have to practice that, but that's what it is. That's what the rehearsal process is. That's what it, if you work, you gain a certain level of comfortability. But anytime you enter a new situation, acting is intense, right? Being vulnerable on stage is intense. Being vulnerable in front of other people can be intense and scary, but that's what we have signed up for. So the more the more you can remind yourself that, like, I'm here, I belong here, I got the job, and I agreed to do this, so I'm going to do it, and I'm going to allow whatever. Again, people say, I think it's, I don't know. I don't know if you've heard this, Rachel or Kelly or Michaela, like, when you enter the rehearsal room, leave the day behind you. That's not, don't do that. Do you know what I mean? You're coming in with, I just had a fight with my partner, or, somebody I had a terrible commute, or my dog is sick, or, you know what I mean? Like, you're coming in with, you can't shut off as a human being, right? You're coming in with whatever you're bringing that day in that moment, and that's going to change, from day to day. And sometimes that's what kind of the rehearsal process is for. You build the frame, right? So when you get to previews or opening night, like, you have an idea of what you're doing, yeah, but you want to stay alive and present night after night, so you can tell that story as fresh and new as possible every day. And so I think, just, again, that's the practice of whatever you're dealing with that day or in that moment. That's what's happening to the character too. And people nobody's going to know that in the audience. So, you know what I mean? They're more often than not, you're more concerned about, it's our own misperception about ourselves and what other people are seeing, right? Rather than what people are actually perceiving. So we are unreliable narrators to ourselves. So, the more you can just be like, you're cool, I got this, I'm just in a play. Go, 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 go. Right? Unless there's some, like, legitimate, real safety or, physical concern. But again, have the conversation wherever possible. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, I hope that question was helpful for others. I know for me, it's just something that I've been struggling with as someone who has ADHD. It seems like my mind or my brain has a lot of chaos or just going on, and so sometimes it is hard to just kind of settle down and just say, breathe. Okay, I'm just going to breathe through this when there's so much other things that are going on inside. And so I just was trying to see, if there was anything. So, but I really appreciate your insight in what you shared. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Rich, I mean, I've had, like, I've worked with you, like, you're a phenomenal actor. I know this, seen it, but also there's nothing wrong with, even in life, we do this all the time. I mean, again, how do you deal with those moments in your real life? You don't have to answer right now. Do you know what I mean? But, like, if you're having, if you're having, like, an ADHD moment, whatever you do in real life is something, like, what would the character, what would you do in that moment? How is that something that can integrate into the character? And it may just be like, you just take a moment longer, because it's what you need in order to move to the next moment. You know, I think, and again, we often feel like I can't do that. You know, I have to be, as an actor, I have to be rigid, you know, or like it's like one of my favorite actors is Bill Nighy, right? I don't know if you know his work, but I think he's phenomenal and great. And he talked about being backstage, and I've seen this too, and I've done it. Like, I'm back in the wings and I'm relaxed. I might even be having a conversation with a friend, you know, or castmate or whatever. And then, oh, my cue's coming up. So I suddenly, like, my breath goes up here and I get real rigid and my spine gets real straight, you know, as opposed to, yeah, I'll meet you for drinks after the show, to be or not to be, whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, just entering, you know, like entering from where you just were, rather than I'm on, you know, I'm performing. And that's, you know, that's, again, that comes with experience, that comes with practice. Like, everyone as I'm maturing and getting older, I'm realizing that how much work, how I can work less every time. That doesn't mean I don't do the preparation and the work, you know, of like figuring out the character and do all the work of the text. But just when I'm on stage and actually in the moment and acting, I don't need to do as much as I thought I did, right? Initially. Like, it's actually the amount of energy, effort, right, that I'm expending to like tell the story is actually, I don't need as much as I thought I did. Or I can work with whatever I can be more present, right? But that is every actor's journey, you know, whether you're Angela Bassett or Rachel Abbott. Do you know what I mean? It's like every actor's journey is like, just how do I become more present, fully present? And the only way we can do that is through the experience of doing it, right? And the only way that we can get that experience is if we, again, train, practice, keep like, have, you know, working towards doing our craft, whether it's, you know, the children's show or Shakespeare or that big movie or that yogurt commercial, you know, like, every actor is going to go through periods of work, dry spells, self-doubt, confidence, you know. It's just, but when you have the opportunity to work, what are you interested in working on in that moment? Like, what are you, Rachel? What are you, Kelly? What are you, Michaela? What am I, Greg? Like, what am I interested in working on for myself as a human? How can I use this audition opportunity, you know, to do that? Because I'm interested in working on that. And so that's going to be my beat and take on the character. And that way it becomes interesting for me. So it's not about trying to please somebody else. I'm doing this. This is, you know, even that audition is a 5-minute job or a 2-minute job, right? So, and like, I'm going to try this, you know, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to work on this, to either stretch myself by going really expansive and big, or the opposite of saying, I'm going to do this with as little effort as possible. Whatever it may be, like, what do I need to work on in that moment? Because again, then you're always using it as an opportunity to hopefully, again, learn and grow and figure things out, you know? So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. That totally leads into my last question for you. I hope this is also helpful for others, but I wanted to know about anything that works for you about the work-life balance, as far as, so it's kind of like a two-part thing. I was trying to figure out, if you're, you know, you're not in a project, you're not performing, are there things that you're doing like before, you know, like doing lots of auditions, or are you trying to network with people? Like, or you like practicing like yourself, like in, you know, taking workshops or classes? You know, I guess I'm just trying to figure out like how to find that balance of your creative endeavors and like when you're not working, or, you know, and balancing like your personal fun activities for yourself. And then
Sure.
also the second part of it, again, I'm thinking about, as someone who has ADHD for myself, I also don't always sometimes know how to do a follow through and networking and connecting with others, after you do projects and things, and, how to kind of keep the momentum or how to keep the workflow going. So I didn't know if there was anything that you might suggest for that.
Yeah. So I'll take the second part first, in terms of like networking and keeping connection up. As actors, we have like really intense, intimate, like it gets intense and intimate really fast, right? Like we form these incredible bonds with people because we're working together under incredible constraints, right, to create a piece of work, right? So these relationships form, and you think, I'm gonna still do this. It's like, oh, we're gonna be friends forever, like, oh yeah, like it's like almost like summer camp. Yeah, well, like it's, I think, relationships, connections, last as long as you work them or want them to, right? And they're not all going to they will, I think there's a misnomer that, like, again, like people move on, like this is an itinerant lifestyle, like it's great if you can find community where you're working with the same people over and over and over again, but the reality of the business is you're going to work with all kinds of different people for short periods of time, long periods of time, medium periods of time, like, so that side of the business, right, again, is something that, like, you need to, as actors, we're responsible for that, like we are our own product, to a great degree. But I would say, if you have an experience, if there's somebody you want to stay connected with, it's like any kind of friendship or relationship, like relationships take work, right? They take, you have to put the effort forward, and hopefully you will get that effort in return. And you'll get that response in return, I think. And you want to, wherever you find connection and community, go towards that, right? Because that's actually where it is, right? You can, and again, this is a process, and it can happen, like sometimes you can spend a lot of time like going after somebody or something that isn't going to give you that in return, right? And that's true of all aspects of life, all fields, personal, professional, whatever it may be. But I think if there's somewhere you want to be, if there are people that you want to work with, and if there are people that you respect and treat you with respect in return, then foster those relationships. Because again, that's, you want to make sure that you're getting what you want and need out of the relationship. And it may not be what you imagined or envisioned initially, but that is actually where your true community and your true support is. And the first, I'm sorry, I forgot
Yeah,
the first
I'm
part.
trying to put that into practice, like you said earlier about the just ask, like, and
Yeah.
there's always sometimes, I don't know, for me personally, sometimes fear about asking, and so that I like that you're saying that it's a process, and yeah, so thank you.
No, totally. And again, I think just knowing you for a couple of years now, Rachel, again, like you started where you started, and you recently just had it's true, right? That you recently had your first paying professional gig. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's awesome. Like it took time, and you were dealing with obstacles and circumstances that most people don't have to deal with. Do you know what I mean? But you stuck to it, and it happened. I think as disabled actors, like it's going to take longer. We have to understand, like the timeline for us is going to be longer, because the level of the opportunity doesn't exist. The knowledge doesn't exist. Like, it's just going to take longer. I may be wrong with that, you know, like anyone other in this business, there are overnight successes, and then there are people who work years and something hit, and then there are people who, do you know what I mean? It's like there's no, you know, like you can make $80,000 acting one year and then make what, you know, like nothing the next. You know, so like that just happens. It's it's not a secure lifestyle, right? So that's what your second question was, right? Like work-life balance, you know, find something that, I mean, I work a day job, right? I have to just stay myself, just stay my life, you know, pay my bills, pay your bills. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, figure out a way to pay your bills. You have to do that, right? So, and I think it's okay to be tired. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to say no, right? I think, and again, this isn't just for disabled actors, this is all actors. Again, we feel this pressure to say yes, 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 all the time because we know like jobs are, it's not going to be, you know, it's a very precarious industry, right? But it's okay to take a break. Like, but how are you gonna, you know, and what fills you? What is gonna, you know, what interests you? Something, you know, it's often said something to the effect of like, you need to have a life in order to present an imagined life on stage, right? Do you know what I mean? If you don't have anything in the tank, if you don't have interest, if you don't have knowledge, you know, if you don't have like a life of your own, you know, where you feel happy, fulfilled, and confident, you know, life is ups and downs, you know. But you're not going to have a rich, fulfilled, creative life. So read, go to museums, like do things, you know, that make you happy, hang with friends, you know. This industry will drive you crazy, you know, and it's not the most positive, you know. When it's great, it's great. But it does take a lot, it does demand a lot, often more than it gives. So and again, that's again, as you said, that's a process. It's and things change, as things are different from when you're 22 to 42, you know, like but there's nothing that says you have to stay in this. There's nothing that says you have to like drive yourself to dust, you know, in order to succeed. There's nothing that says I have to suffer, right, in order to be a good artist or actor, right? There are all these misconceptions about what it takes, like, and I think the best actors I've ever worked with are also just the best people, right? They have just like, they're grounded, they have like healthy family lives, you know, like they're just good people, you know, and wherever possible, be a good person, you know, to whomever you meet, you know, like be friendly to everybody, you know, respect everybody. That's from like the stagehand, you know, to the, you know, the director and to the whatever, you know, a play takes a lot of people who are working hard, and actors are just one small piece of that, you know. And I think people at the end of the day, you know, yeah, it's like we're millionaires sitting around, you're dressed as Captain America, you're Thor, you're the Hulk, whatever, but really at the end, I'm just an actor, you know, we're just actors and we happen to have this job, you know. And I think people want to work with people who are good people, who they can stand to be with in a room. And so how, again, like be the best person that you can be, you know. And as you move through life, you know, that's having a as full a life as possible is going to make your work fuller, right? And being open to experience is going to inform your experience as a human, as an actor. So it's not, there's no easy answer to that other than you have control. As actors, we say you have no control or agency, right? Or you have very little, but you have control about how involved you are or aren't in this business. And that can change and be in flux and flow throughout the course of your career, your life. But you're in charge. Or don't let anyone try and take or tell you that you don't have agency over your own kind of yourself. But and you have to take care of yourself, physically and emotionally. And it's if you're feeling burnout or tired, it's okay to say, I gotta step away from this. I find that incredibly hard. But every time I try to do that, I'm like, oh yeah, here what did I just do? I agreed to 7 different things. But maybe by the time I'm 70, I'll have that figured out. But yeah. And wherever possible, have fun. Again, remember, if enjoy it, find the enjoyment in it. Because if it becomes a thing where you no longer enjoy it, or you're just grinding through it, then something is off, right? Because this is hard enough. So if you're not enjoying it, if you're not having fun, then maybe it's time to reassess.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just keep thinking about when you said we are unreliable narrators to ourselves. That's so real. I don't know. As someone with anxiety, that's so real. I think that's the best way to phrase it. Now I'm gonna keep thinking about that. Unreliable narrators to ourselves.
Yeah. It's one thing that I've learned to kind of manage my cerebral palsy is, again, it's I have physical anxiety, right? As I move through the world, my body's like, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, don't fall, all the time. So, I'm literally having a conversation with myself when I'm kind of clicked in, is I'm okay. I either say I'm okay, or you're okay. I'm literally having a conversation with my body as I moving down the street. Or I'll say, hey, what do you want to do right now? Do you know what I mean? What are you trying to tell me right now? And do it. So maybe I need to do this, or move down the street differently, or whatever it may be. But you know what I mean? It's I found and again, I'm practicing that, letting that impulse move through me, right? Or allowing whatever it is, because something in me is trying to tell me something. It's saying, listen to me, 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 listen to me. And it takes less time to actually stop and listen to that thing, listen to that voice, listen to what, than keep it and then deal with the after effects or the ripple effects of whatever that may be down the road. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. That takes work. But I've found that whenever I am attentive, right, to whatever's going on with me, it takes less time to feel what I'm feeling, right? And move on with my life than clamp down on whatever it is I'm feeling, yeah. So, and that's, yeah, I don't know. I hope, try it. I don't know, try it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. I love that. I love that. That's very helpful to think about.
Yeah. We'll report back. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, that's cool.
All right, Gregg, I will let you go, but I'll start with our ending questions to send you off. What would you want the world to know about you as an actor?
incredibly loyal, and I will work incredibly hard to help tell the story.
And if anyone here would like to stay in touch or might have future questions for you, where is the best place for them to find you?
Email Kelly Porter, and then she can email me.
Yeah, I'll just be Gregg's personal assistant.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
No,
contact me.
I have a company called The Apathite, and a website. You can Google me. There are lots of ways to find me and get in touch with me. But one thing I will, I have a busy life and priorities and things like that. But I'm happy to talk to anybody, right? And I can't be all things to all people, but I will. I like meeting new people. I like meeting younger actors. I like, like if I can be of help or service, I will. I always endeavor to try and be available, and hopefully I'll tell you if I can't. But if I'm not communicating with you, it's not because I don't want to. It just means I'm busy doing other things. Probably taking care of a toddler. Yeah. So you can find me through my personal website, my company website. Yeah. But if or walking around New York, say hi.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's lovely to see you, ladies.
Yes, thank you so much.
Have
Oh my gosh,
so much.
insightful.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Michaela?
Oh, I said so insightful, so insightful.